Good morning, all. Bore da pawb, and welcome to this webinar. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Tony Hicks, and I head up the Welsh Government's team network of international trade advisors based throughout the length and breadth of Wales. We work with businesses, exporters across all sectors of business, and of course, businesses in the tech space as well, as indeed this is one of the Welsh Government's priority sectors. This webinar is focused on exporting goods and services to the EU, which for obvious reasons is a very hot topic at present, to say the least. Of course, our ability to be able to continue trading effectively with the EU is absolutely vital. Not just because they're our nearest neighbours and largest trading partner, but also because they represent a huge percentage of the UK's and Wales's exports, imports, and of course supply chain makeup. So I'm delighted, therefore, to be joined today by Mike Wilson, and Mike is the CEO and founder of a company called Go Exporting, which, as you can tell by the name, is a specialist consultancy which is focused on exporting in particular. Mike has got over 25 years experience in sales and marketing, with a particular emphasis on developing international markets. And he's done this with businesses of all sizes, ranging from startups through to SMEs, and indeed with multinational national corporations also. Mike is going to share with us his knowledge and experience of trading with the EU, how it's changed since the end of the transition period, and tell you a little bit about some of the pitfalls, the issues that we're finding since the 1st of January, and ways in which you can actually find out more and overcome those particular issues. In terms of questions, please feel free to ask these in the chat bar, which are to the right of your screens, and then we will attempt to answer these at the end of the session. I'll pose them to Mike, and we'll attempt to answer your particular questions. We've got an hour for this session, but Mike has got quite a bit of material to get through. So without further ado, I shall hand you over to Mike. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tony, and thank you for the invitation to present this session. I'll just share my screen with everyone. Okay, hopefully you can see that now. So we're going to look at exporting goods and services to the EU and what has changed since the 1st of January, and the effect of the new trade agreements that were signed just before Christmas at the very last minute. And it's causing a few problems for people in how to interpret that and how to implement that. So my name is Mike Wilson, as Tony said. I'm the CEO of Go Exporting, and I've spent a lot of time, we've dedicated ourselves to working out what the implications of Brexit are going to be for our clients, and helping them to manage this transition period. So what we're going to look at is what changed on the 1st of January, some details about the trade agreement, the main points, and then what are the implications for businesses of those changes, and how to identify the specific challenges in your business, and really how to address those challenges and to maintain your current exports as well as to prosper. But first, if I may, just quickly about ourselves. Go Exporting, as it says there, we're a specialist export consultancy, and we look to successfully launch businesses into new international markets. I've got 30 years experience. It comes as a bit of a surprise sometimes when I add that up. But we specialize in helping companies to be ready for export, assessing opportunities, strategy in opening markets. And as we've said, we've spent a lot of time dedicating to help companies manage the Brexit transition, doing Brexit reviews and Brexit consultancy. And even now, in January, we're getting a lot of new clients with teething problems, shall we call them. So what changed on the 1st of January? Well, firstly, we became no longer an EU member state. Effectively, that was a year before, but we were in the transition period. So we're not part of the customs union or the single market anymore. And so effectively we're a third party country as far as the EU is concerned. They deal with us in the same way as they would the US, or more like a country like Canada or Japan, where they have a trade agreement. But within that process, we lost access to all of the EU's free trade agreements that they have with approximately 75, 76 countries. And we're now busily trying to replace those with our own free trade agreements. We've done reasonably well with, for example, Canada, with Japan and Korea and so on. But there are still a number that we need to replace. And then, as we know, we entered into this UK-EU Trade and Cooperation Agreement, which is meant to bring tariff-free trading between the two countries or two blocks, but is a little bit more complicated than that. And we've all heard of the Northern Ireland Protocol, and that now applies. So trading with Northern Ireland is definitely different than it was previously. And again, that is causing some confusions in the marketplace. So what are the main points of the UK-EU TCA? First thing is there's no tariffs or quotas on UK-EU goods. It's the first agreement that the EU's ever entered into where it's totally tariff-free. But there are, of course, rules that apply to that, and the main area is the rules of origin that apply. We'll come on to more details about this later because it is very complicated, and the different rules apply depending on the products that you supply or the services that you supply. And you must qualify to claim tariff removal, or you face supplying under WTO terms. So one of the other big differences that we've seen compared to last year is customs procedures and documentation that applies. We're now the same as any other country as far as the EU is concerned. So instead of having dispatches to the EU, they're now exports. And instead of arrivals from the EU, they're now imports. So documentation needs to be completed before you can export or import. The agreement did bring in mutual recognition of what's called AEO schemes, so that's authorized economic operators. That's a scheme which helps to simplify some of the customs procedures. You effectively become a trusted trader, so you can move goods more easily. So that was one of the positives from the scheme, although qualifying for AEO status can take a little bit of time. It did also bring talk about product and regulatory compliance requirements. We'll come on to this a little bit more detail later, because there are some changes there as well that CE will no longer, or from the end of 2021, will not be recognised as such in the UK. They didn't include an agreement on financial services, which a lot of people were hoping it would. There is a framework for further discussions, but so far it's not looking, there's a memorandum of understanding, but we're not quite sure where that's going to go. And already the business is looking to move from London to Frankfurt or to Paris. There's talk of mutual recognition of professional qualifications, which is obviously very important for services. But again, that's a framework, and there are different regulations in different countries which need to be looked at. The agreement did agree on business travel rules, so you can travel visa-free for business for 90 days out of 180. Although there are some exceptions to that, and if you're performing certain tasks, you still do need a visa. Again, we'll look at that later. There was also a digital trade agreement. Again, more on this later on, but one of the most important points is under GDPR, there's a temporary bridge so that data can continue to flow until the EU makes its mind up whether our data processing controls are as strong as their own and allows that free data flow. So again, there's a little bit of an umbrella there, or a cloud hanging over as to whether that will happen. Trademarks, yeah, again, existing European trademarks effectively no longer apply, but the UK has issued new trademarks to replace those to cover the UK. So that's all stayed the same. And the whole agreement includes enforcement mechanisms. So the agreement is that we will have mutual commitments not to lower our standards on environment or workers' rights and climate change, for example. But if divergence does occur, And if that impacts trade, then there are mechanisms for the trade agreement to be renegotiated, or parts of it to be renegotiated. And there are strict clauses on that, and it could lead to tariffs being imposed if that was serious enough. So we're not free from it. We have to be careful what we decide we want to do ourselves. And there is a binding arbitration system that's built into the agreement as well. Services are not really covered in any great detail in the agreement, but they are free to continue in most cases, and the reverse charge VAT system will continue to apply, although there's no specific easements really in the agreement. So that's the main points that were covered by the TCA. But what are the implications? What are the implications of all of that and Brexit in general for your business? You know, we're going to cover a number of issues here, or a number of areas, the HS code through to specifically about the tech sector. Hopefully it's not going to scramble your brains, but there is a lot of information to take in. So some of it we'll go through. You know, maybe you need more information at a later date, but we'll give you the basics. So it all starts with the HS code. The HS code is the customs code for your product, and that will determine everything. That will determine which duty rates, if any, apply, which licenses, which approvals, which procedures may apply for your products. And it's important that you make sure that that is right. And if in doubt, you can ask for a ruling from the government to make sure that you're using the correct code. You'd be surprised how many clients we work with that they're using the wrong code, and this can be causing them problems. So it is something which is worth checking. You can see there the links to websites where you can check the tariff codes on the government websites, and it's well worth checking those because it is, as I say, it's the starting point for everything to do with export and imports now. So one of the complications, one of the real implications of Brexit is more red tape. You probably, if you're already exporting, you will already have a UK EORI number. Now, EORI is Economic Operators Recognition and Identification Number. Everyone that's dealing with export or import needs to have this number to put onto their customs information to be able to complete an export or import declaration. So you need a UK EORI number if you're receiving goods or sending goods out of the country. You should have been sent this automatically if you're already exporting, but if you didn't and you're going to start exporting, then you would need to apply for one. And again, it's a relatively simple process on the government gov.uk website. In some circumstances, you may need an EU EORI number as well, or an EORI number from an EU country, that says, in order to be able to import or transact in the EU. You would need that if you were going to undertake a customs transaction in an EU country. So that's one of the key areas if you're going to import. So for example, if you're going to import on DDP terms, delivered duty paid, if you're going to send to a customer on those terms, you would need to have an EU EORI number in order to process the customs information in France, for example. And if you're in Northern Ireland or trading with Northern Ireland, you need an XI EORI number as well. So it's a separate EORI number. It's effectively another EU number. And some EU countries are actually withdrawing their EORI numbers if you have an XI EORI number as well. But it shows that Northern Ireland is becoming and effectively treated as a European country rather than a UK country. So to help with this transition period, the government introduced its new border operating model and has introduced that in stages in order to help companies to fulfill the correct paperwork and get used to the ideas. So from the 1st of January, in order to fulfill import processes, you need to have a GB EORI number. You need to know the commodity code for your product. You need to know the origin of your goods, and you need to know the customs value of the goods. So they're the basic information that you need in order to import. For non-controlled goods, and there's a list of what controlled goods are on the gov.uk website, you can delay those customs declarations at the moment for 6 months. That's up until July, at the end of June. You can delay them for 6 months. But you must keep a record of what you've brought into the country in that period, or your customs intermediary must keep a record. But that also allows you to defer any duty that would be payable on those goods. But when you do put in your eventual submission to customs declaration, because you still have to do it 6 months later, you or your agent must be authorized for this simplified customs declaration procedure and have a duty deferment account. Now, in some cases, your freight forwarder will do that for you. In other cases, it makes sense to have your own. If you're a non-UK established business, you need to use a UK established agent in order to be able to follow this procedure. But if it's a controlled good that you're trying to import, then you need to make a customs declaration from the beginning. There's no delay in that. There's no transition period. The next stage is stage 2 from the 1st of April. So there's no change for controlled goods. But if you're bringing in live animals, for example, or plant products, there will be requirements for sanitary and phytosanitary controls that you'll need to follow, and you'll need to pre-notify governments, and there will be physical checks on the goods. So, and then the final stage is stage 3. That's when everything gets to where it's going to be from there on. So customs declarations will be required at the time of import, and that will be required on all consignments. So every shipment that comes in and out of the UK will now need a customs declaration. And as we've seen, there's real potential for delays at port because of this coming in and out, and confusion because of the extra paperwork and so on. You know, we have clients that are freight forwarders, and they say that in no way are we ready. There's supposed to be building work going on at ports for the border processing points for live animals coming in, where the government's not providing as much money as they need to build them, and so on. So there are going to be issues. There's going to be teething issues, and there's been a lack of trucks coming into the UK. So return trips, the cost of freight is going up by up to 50% in some cases, not to mention the additional costs of paperwork and customs declarations and so on. So you need to take all of this into account when you're looking to import or export, you know, from the UK now, because it could have an effect on your just-in-time deliveries if that's what you're working on. So it's important to be prepared. So for exporting, again, you need to have an EORI number. You need to select a customs intermediary if you don't, unless you're going to do the declarations yourself. In most cases, companies will use a customs intermediary. That can be a freight forwarder or a specialist customs agent who will prepare the paperwork and present the paperwork electronically to the government for your customs declarations. But if you do decide to do it yourself, you'll need to register to make declarations online using what's called the National Export System, NES. And you'll also need access to the government's customs system known as CHIEF, or the CDS system if you're from Northern Ireland, which is supposed to be taking over from CHIEF but hasn't as yet. And all declarations need to be submitted electronically. There's a link in this. I think the slides will be circulated there, which will of where to apply. And you may need training and software enabled in order to be able to do that. So we're advising most clients to actually use a third party, to use your freight forwarder or a customs agent. Although I have to say that there are a shortage of these people at the moment, and they're rushed off their feet because, you know, the number of declarations is going from 50 million before Brexit to, they reckon, 300 million after Brexit. So there's a massive demand for customs declarations and customs agents, and it is reckoned that there's possibly up to 50,000 short in requirement of customs agents. So you may have problems. We're recommending clients to have more than one customs agent, 2 or 3, so you can mix and match depending on the demand at the time. You also then need to check your duties and the customs procedures for your particular goods, and again that's based on the HS code. And if you haven't got an EORI number, you need to an EU EORI number. You need to apply for one if you do need that, depending on how you're delivering. So, in order to complete the export documentation, you'll need a GB EORI number, the HS code. You'll need to ascertain the value of the goods, have access to the chief system, either yourself or through a customs agent, and you'll need to check the license requirements for your goods. You complete the export declaration using the NES system to get a unique reference number. And you can consider simplified customs declarations when you can then, as the goods are going out of the country, you can put in a simple declaration, and then we have 14 days to put in the full declaration. But again, you need to be registered for that. And you're required to keep records of all goods exported to the EU for at least 6 years. Yeah, so if you want to, when the goods arrive in the EU, you need to make sure that whoever's clearing the goods, in most cases your customer, has the right information in place so that they have their EU EORI number, that they have any relevant import licenses, and that they've completed the import declaration. If not, your goods are going to get stuck, and it will depend on your Incoterms as to who is responsible for those goods at what stage. You should consider transit procedures to move your goods across the EU borders. So if they're going by truck and they're going to go across different countries, then your freight forwarder should already be registered for what's called the NCTS system, new computerized transit system, which allows goods to more easily travel between countries across the EU without having to do a customs declaration in every country. You may also want to consider other customs special procedures or authorizations which may be beneficial, and some of these will be really beneficial in terms of where rules of origin, or you're importing from the EU and want to re-export to the EU, which we'll come on to in a moment. For example, customs warehousing, inward processing relief, so if you want to bring something into the country just for a short time to either repair it or to process it and then re-export it. The same with outward processing relief, if you want to send something out of the country, have it processed or repaired and then bring it back. There are processes where you can use simplified procedures and not be liable to duties and VAT. Same with temporary admissions and authorized use. So there are special procedures that can make the whole process a lot easier for you, and it's important to choose the right ones. So in Northern Ireland, we've already mentioned that it's a different case now. You can see here that if we're sending from GB to Northern Ireland, that's actually classed effectively as an import into Northern Ireland. And if Northern Ireland is sending to the rest of the GB, then that's an export from Northern Ireland. So it's almost the same as if we're sending from GB to the EU. There is a declaration that needs to be fulfilled in order to send those goods or to export those goods. Excuse me. So this Northern Ireland Protocol, the initial period of that is until the 31st of December 2024. And there are options then to renegotiate it, but that's the system that's in place now. And one key area here is that if a good that you're sending from Wales, for example, if you're sending it to Ireland, and it's considered to be at risk of actually, if you're sending it to Northern Ireland and it's considered at risk of going across the border into Southern Ireland, then those goods could be stopped, or you could be charged duty and as if it was going straight to Ireland, if duty would apply on those goods. But it is possible to actually apply for the UK Trader Service, via the UK Trader Service, for a dispensation where your goods are recognised as not at risk of going outside Northern Ireland, so you can alleviate that problem. But you do need to be able to prove that the goods will be staying within Northern Ireland. So we recommend that you register for what's called the Trader Support Service if you're dealing with Northern Ireland. This is a government scheme body which helps people to lodge their customs declarations and helps them with the transaction, the processes with dealing with Northern Ireland at the moment. And from a VAT point of view, Northern Ireland is in terms of sending from the GB to Northern Ireland, it's the same as it's always been. It's a UK transaction, so you add VAT in the normal way. But Northern Ireland uniquely is eligible to enrol in EU VAT schemes like the one-stop shop, which is coming up, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And is also entitled to use the EU VAT refund system for expenses incurred in the EU, which the rest of the UK is not allowed to do anymore. We've mentioned a couple of times about Incoterms already, and these are more important than ever. These are basically govern how your goods are shipped and who is responsible for what within that transaction in terms of the paperwork, in terms of duties, in terms of VAT. So they can have a big impact on the transaction. And it's very important that you get these right and you agree these with your customers and with your suppliers in advance to avoid any confusion and avoid finding that, that your goods are stopped or you're getting unexpected costs. So it brings extra responsibilities and liabilities depending on which Incoterm you use. The best Incoterm for a supplier to use in terms of if you want to export to the EU, in terms of minimum responsibility anyway, is Ex Works. That brings maximum responsibility on your EU buyer. They would have to carry out the export documentation in the UK and the import documentation and clearance with VAT in their country. Most cases, that wouldn't be acceptable. So you could look at what's called FCA, and that's where the UK exporter is responsible for loading the goods and is also the declarant of record for export. So you're organising the export out of the UK, but your customer is responsible for the import. So that's often one of the Incoterms which is used. The alternative is DAP. If you want to pay for the transport to your customer, so you want to deliver it to their door, but you don't want to be responsible for the customs declarations or VAT, then you would use what's called DAP, delivered at place. So the EU buyer is then the declarant of record in the EU and is responsible for the import duties and the VAT. So that's it. It's important that you follow that. And DDP gives maximum responsibility to you if you're the exporter. That's delivered, duty paid. But beware that that means also that you're liable for the VAT on that shipment, the import VAT in the country that you're shipping to. And unless you then have a VAT number in that country, so if you're shipping to Germany, if you've got you would need to have a German VAT number in order to be able to reclaim that VAT. Otherwise, it's an additional cost to your business that you can't reclaim from in the UK, for example. One of the biggest areas that we've seen some confusion and more issues than people were expecting is the rules of origin, which are in the trade agreement. We expected this would be an issue. In fact, we wrote an article last year calling it the greatest Brexit challenge you've never heard of. And unfortunately, a lot of the things that we put in there have proven true. So you now need to prove, in order to qualify for tariff-free trade with the EU, you now need to prove that your goods are UK origin. And different goods have different rules within the agreement. So you need to check within the agreement what applies for your business and your goods. And that, again, comes down to the HS code, this customs code. Following that will tell you what are the rules for your products. One good thing within the agreement, and one thing we were hoping for, is that EU raw materials, EU goods, and EU processing can count towards UK origin and vice versa when you're bringing it in, when you're using it as part of your production process, for example. So if you're bringing components from the EU, using them in your manufacturing process, and then to create your product and then sending them back out again, those EU goods will count as towards your UK origin. But there is one area to be aware of on that, is that there does need to be a qualifying level of production or processing in the UK in order to qualify for that, and that does vary depending on the goods as well. In the trade agreement, it does vary. So this is where you've probably heard of the Percy pig example from Marks and Spencer's, where they're importing Percy pigs from Germany into the UK, and then they're re-exporting them to Ireland, for example. Under the terms of the agreement, they can import it into the UK without any duty. It becomes tariff-free. But because they're not processing that good, when they resend it to the EU, tariffs could apply to it. And that is a difficulty which a lot of companies are going to find, because a lot of processes, a lot of our supply chains have been very interwoven with the EU. I had a client the other day who sent, during his process, he sent goods to Italy to be welded and then brought them back, and the goods coming in from all over to make up their products. So these complications in supply chain are going to have a real effect on a lot of people, and supply chains will change. We've no doubt about that because of this, to simplify it. There are some ways around it. In terms of, you could bring goods in, if it's a finished product, you could bring it into a customs warehouse and not clear it into the UK, or you could use inward processing relief. We'd have to go into a bit more detail in those. This rules of origin is a whole webinar in its own right, in order to look at all of the implications of the different rules. So as well as different qualifying levels of production that may be required in the EU, there is this concept of value added or accumulation. So, if you're adding value to the product above a certain level, then within the UK, then it can qualify as UK origin and tariff free. But as we just said, supply chains can be very, very complex. You look at the car industry, they reckon that 41% of components that are in UK assembled cars are sourced in the UK, but of those, only 25% are actually manufactured in the UK or actually UK products. So that would fall short of the regulations, the rules of origin in this new agreement to claim UK origin. So there are complications there for a lot of people. And it's introduced, the TCA has introduced this concept of max-non, which is maximum non-originating materials. So materials that don't originate from the UK or don't originate from the EU. So if you brought them from the US, wherever it might be, there's a maximum level that can be included in your products before you are not able to claim UK origin. And that does vary from 40% to 50, 60. In the case of batteries for electric vehicles, it's 70% can be from non-originating materials, but it does depend on the product. So it's something that you do need to look at and to follow quite closely and analyze. So a complicated area, which I say we could spend the whole webinar talking about. So in order to prove origin, you need to hold the evidence that you're proving. You can self-declare that the goods are UK origin, for example, but you do need to be able to prove that, and you need to be able to show that either to your suppliers or to the authorities if there's ever an audit. And if you're importing goods, you need to make sure you've got the information from your suppliers to show the actual origin of those products. You may be buying it from France, but has it come from China? Has it come from India? And it's where that good was actually manufactured, and how it qualifies for its origin that you need to look at, not where you're buying it from. So you can self-declare the origin, as I say, but then you can do a supplier's declaration. If you're the importer, you can use what's called importer's knowledge. So you can say, yes, I know that this good's coming from my supplier are EU origin, for example, so they should be tariff-free. You'd be able to use preferential tariffs. But again, you need to have evidence of that. There is a special dispensation until the 31st of December this year, where you don't need to have that in your hand at the time, but you do need to be confident that that is the case. And we're advising clients to really make sure you've got the information in hand as soon as possible, if not straight away. And as we saw earlier, when you're importing from into the UK, for the moment, you can defer your customs declarations for up to 6 months. So that gives you a little bit of breathing space. But be aware that you do need to have that information. So you have to be able to prove the origin of the product is either EU or UK in order to avoid duties or to qualify for the preferential 0 rates of duty in the tariff agreement. But again, some specific processing or production process may be required on top of that in order to be able to do that. So, as if rules of origin wasn't complicated enough, then we've got VAT changes and VAT procedures which have changed. Now VAT is due on import, on all imports and exports. Fortunately, the UK government has introduced postponed VAT accounting, which means that when you import something, the VAT that you would have to pay on importation, you can actually delay and put it onto your next VAT return. So effectively, you don't have that burden of having to pay it, and it becomes, you know, a 0 transaction within your VAT return, but you do have to account for it. It's whether if you're sending out of the UK into the EU, the rules in different EU countries are different. So in some cases, your customer may need to pay the VAT up front to their authorities on import into that country. Or you may feel that you want to have you want to clear the goods for your customer, your relationships, you want to keep them smooth, you want to keep the transaction smooth, and you want to be able to deliver similar to you were doing beforehand. If you do that, then you would need to have a VAT number in each EU country that you're delivering to, and that can be can be a bit of a process to set up those VAT numbers. You may need a fiscal representative, for example, in the country. So that's a business that is established in the country where you're wanting to apply for a VAT number. They must be local, and they take joint and several liability for the VAT that you may be incurring or may be liable for. So you may have to provide a financial guarantee in order to set that up. So it can be complicated, but there are instances where you were in situations where you would have to have an EU VAT number. So, for example, if you're buying and then selling within the EU, you would, and it's not the goods are not coming to the UK, you would need to have a VAT number. So, for example, before Brexit, we used to use what was called triangulation. There was a triangulation simplification in VAT. So, if you were a UK seller, you were buying from France, for example, but it was being shipped directly to your customer in Germany, there was a triangulation simplification, which meant the VAT issue was simplified considerably. Now you can't do that. So if you're supplying from France to Germany, you would need to have a VAT number either in France to clear the goods there, or in Germany where your customer is. So that's a considerable complication compared to the way things were before. Similarly, if you're going to import goods directly into an EU country, if you're going to bring goods from China, for example, directly into France, you would need an EU VAT number, a French VAT number in this case, to actually do that. Also, if you're going to hold goods in a warehouse or on consignment stock in the EU, you would need to have an EU VAT number in order to carry out that transaction. So, and the same with selling goods over the internet through catalogs, distance selling to consumers. Again, you would need to have a local VAT number in order to be able to do that. Although there are some simplifications coming along later in the year, the one-stop shop system, which will help that a little bit. So you didn't need to have one in every country. But as you can see, there's a lot of implications on the VAT front, and it can be very complicated. And again, it can affect the way you trade and the way you're dealing with your customers. And we really recommend that you talk to your customers and talk to your suppliers and discuss all of these factors, Incoterms and so on, origin of products, before you get to the stage where you're having issues getting goods through customs. Again, on VAT, if you're selling business to consumer, obviously the rules have changed from the 1st of January, but they'll also be changing again in July when the EU introduces this one-stop shop procedure. That's an expansion of the current mini one-stop shop, which is used for digital downloads, for example. digital transactions, which as tech companies you may be involved in. You may be registered for MOS already in the UK. If you were registered for UK MOS, you now need to register for MOS in an EU country. You can't be registered in the UK anymore. So, and there are some changes there. So the thresholds before you need to pay VAT has changed to 10,000 euros. So you can supply up to 10,000 euros as distance selling across the EU before you have to charge VAT. But once you've done that, you have to be registered, or you have to join the one-stop shop scheme. And that now becomes due in the member state of consumption, the MSC as it's called. So you have to charge the rate of VAT that's applicable in that country. And remember, VAT is not the same in all countries of the EU. It ranges from something like 17% up to 27, 28%, depending on where you're selling to. So if you're selling online through a shop and you're giving a final price, including VAT, be aware that there'll be some differences there in your returns, or you need to find a way of adding different VAT rates at the end. So that's something to take into consideration. So as a non-EU country now, as the UK, we can still apply for this one-stop shop and the mini one-stop shop, but you need to apply for it in an EU country, and you need to register in that country. There are three variants of this one-stop shop. So there's Union, which is for Union countries. So, you know, France, Germany, Southern Ireland, and Northern Ireland also counts as it can join the Union OS as well. There's non-Union OS, which is UK businesses now from now on, and there's Import OS, where you're just importing into the EU but below 150 euros. So that's a simplification for smaller transactions. It's not compulsory, and you don't have to register for that in July, and it may not enter in July. It's already been delayed because of COVID, so it may take a little bit longer. But if you don't register for it, then you would need to have a VAT registration number in every country that you're supplying to in order to be able to reclaim the VAT and complete the transaction. You know, I have a client who supplies proteins, and they've now got 6 different VAT numbers across Europe in order to be able to supply direct to their customers. So, yeah, quickly, if you are registered for MOS, if you're a mini one-stop shop, if you were registered for that in the UK, that can no longer be used in the EU. You would need to re-register in an EU country, as we've already said. And there are some deadlines there that you need to follow in order to submit your last returns from the UK MOS system. So approvals and CE marking. This is another area of change. So the UK has introduced what's called the UK Conformity Assessed. So that's similar to the CE marking from the EU, but the EU will not accept and will not recognise the UKCA so far anyway. They're not accepting it as equivalent to CE. So it could come to the case where you would have to have UKCA and CE recognition approval, because the EU will also no longer recognise conformity assessments that have been carried out by UK notified bodies. So they'll no longer be recognised. So you need to do the work twice, basically. So that's a difficult area, and there's no agreement in the TCA on mutual recognition of certified products. So it brings additional work for you, brings additional responsibilities that need to be taken into account. There is a period, where the UK will accept for the rest of this year the CE marking, but after that you will need to have UKCA in order to supply into the UK. And linked to that in some ways is who will be the importer. Now, the EU law says whoever imports, takes brings first buys the product in the EU is the importer of record, basically, whoever handles the customs transaction. And that brings additional responsibilities in terms of the compliance issues, in terms of CE, for example. The person that imports has to be certain that the CE is correct and that all their compliance matters have been handled, so they could be liable for that. So importing is more complicated than it was, or responsibilities are greater than they used to be. And that could mean that you would have to hand over your technical or product file to every distributor or importer of your product, so they're confident that your products comply. It is possible, however, to appoint what's called a responsible person or an authorized representative. So that's someone in the EU who takes that responsibility for you. Of course, again, there's going to be costs involved, but that would save you having to give out your technical file, your information to every distributor that you have or every customer that becomes the importer of record if they ask for it. There may be people on here that are developing medical products. You'll be aware of the MDR regulations, specific regulations. Under those regulations, you can also appoint an initial importer who will take on all of the responsibilities and will doesn't have to physically accept the goods, but they take on the responsibilities of those products as far as the legalities are concerned. And they can track if there are any issues with the products as well, warranty issues, for example, that need to be registered or recorded. But those companies must be within the EU. We did some work for a client on finding initial importers, an initial importer. Finding a responsible person or authorized rep is not so difficult, but finding the initial importer is a little bit more difficult, but we did manage to find it. There are not so many companies that have set up so far to do that, but it can be done. So what about the service sector? We've talked a lot about products, and that's the reason we've talked a lot about products is because the agreement really talks about products on the whole, and a lot of the changes are to do with products. But there are changes to the service sector. Fortunately, the VAT treatment is the same as before Brexit, so this reverse charge VAT is still the case. The agreement has allowed that you don't need to have a local presence in order to provide services in the EU, which is obviously a great point. But there's no agreement yet on financial services, as we've already mentioned. But the agreement does set out terms of access to EU markets, so that we are guaranteed that our services can have access into an EU market and vice versa, of course. Short-term travel, as we've seen, is allowed. But in some cases, visas or work permits may be required. So, for example, if you're transferring to a branch or subsidiary, that goes without saying, really, you would need a visa. But also, if you're carrying out a contract to supply a service in the EU where you don't have a presence, your engineers may need a visa for that as well. So that needs to be checked. And if you're carrying out services as a self-employed person, you would need to have a visa. Or if you're going to the EU temporarily yourself to invest, or on behalf of a company, on behalf of yourself or on behalf of a company, you would need a visa as well. So there is some changes there. We are no longer free to establish in the EU or EFTA region. It doesn't mean we can't do it, but rules will apply. There could be restrictions on our ability to own and manage or direct a company registered in the EU, differing requirements on nationality and residency for directors in different countries within the EU, for example. And there may be possible limits on equity, depending on which country levels that within countries. And there may be additional charges as well. So there are some factors that need to be taken into account. We're no longer treated as a local supplier, but as a third country supplier. And from that point of view, we need to check the national regulations in each country. The EU doesn't have a harmonized market for services, so you need to check the regulations in each of the countries that you're dealing in. To check the rules for each profession as well. Each profession will be different. And but you can register for MOS, as we've already seen, mini one-stop shop for digital products in an EU country, which makes that easier. There is a framework for mutual recognition of qualifications, but it's no more than the framework. And in fact, you may need to apply in different countries to have your qualifications accepted as being equivalent for trading or dealing or providing services in that country. So that's a little bit about the service sector. And what about the tech sector specifically? Well, the GDPR rules, the data rules, there's a 6-month bridge that's been included in the agreement so that data can flow as it's done previously for that 6-month period. And that's to allow the EU to actually decide whether our rules and regulations are adequate and whether they're going to allow that free transfer of customers' data moving forward. So there is a little bit of a danger that might not happen, or it's still something which needs to be agreed. The EU needs to agree on the UK adequacy of our rules and regulations, basically. So the trade agreement does include a digital trade chapter, which is very rare in free trade agreements. So that's a positive. And it covers things such as data flows. It gives a positive obligation within the agreement to allow cross-border data flows to facilitate trade in the digital economy, for example. And it also includes a ban on localization. So you can't say that the data has to be held in a particular country. So your customer in France can't say that data you're holding to provide service to them has to be held in France, for example. That's not part of the agreement. There are rules against that. So that's a good area. And it also prevents one country saying to the UK, for example, you must have an establishment in our country in order to provide services. So that's covered, so that's part of the agreement. So you can continue to provide services without an establishment. It does contain, however, a chapter and a commitment for both sides to continue to provide high levels of standards of personal data protection. So that's part of the agreement. So emerging technology and cooperation obligation, again, that's an important one for the tech sector. It contains a positive obligation for the UK and the EU to cooperate on the development of emerging technologies, such as AI and quantum computing, just as some examples. So it creates a dialogue and a common understanding, cooperation in areas to support research and product development in these sectors between the EU and the UK. It also creates compatible market rules, so that it allows these technologies to be developed in the UK and the EU to be more easily sold in each other's markets. So it's an important part of the agreement for the tech sector. As we all know, part of the discussions in the trade agreement, one of the stumbling blocks was about government commitment, government subsidies in terms of R&D funding and so on, and concerns that the UK government would try and give more help to UK companies compared to the EU. In reality, we do less than EU countries anyway. We're aiming for 2.4% of GDP by 2027. Whereas Germany is already at 3.1% in terms of investment in R&D. So, but that is in place, and the government has committed to replace EU funding, although there's been no concrete proposals as yet. Free movement of labour will make things more difficult, that's for sure. But just going back, we will associate with EU programs such as Horizon and so on, but not Erasmus+. We've introduced our own touring program to sponsor students going abroad and things like that. So we are associating as a third country to other EU programs that have helped fund research and development in this country. End of free movement of labour may make recruitment more difficult for research and scientific, but that's something that we'll have to work through. Patents are fortunately not affected by Brexit, because the European Patent Office is a non-geographical institution. It's not part of the EU, so patents still apply. And UK intellectual property laws mainly incorporate European laws anyway, and as we saw earlier, trademarks and so on have been automatically incorporated into the UK law. So how do you identify the challenges within your business? I know we're running out of time, so I'll just run through this very quickly. We recommend that you do a complete business review. Every department, even now, we've got a lot of clients that in the last 2 weeks have signed up for a complete review because they thought they were prepared, but they're not. And this can be done either with companies like ourselves, or you can do it through the government's uk.gov, gov.uk transition. You can go on there, you can put in details about your company, and it'll give you details of which websites to go to for the information that you should need. It can still be a little confusion. You go from one website to another without really knowing where you started or finished, but you can do that and it will give you the information. Or as we say, we and companies like us offer a Brexit, post-Brexit fast-track reviews for companies. So yeah, I'll just skip through this. Just basically, we've gone through this. It's how to address the export challenge. It'll be part of the slides. You'll be able to see it. It shows you what you need to do from EORI numbers, certificates, VAT, and so on. How to manage your imports, and the same with your exports. And how do you manage, how do you maintain your export business? There is a hesitance towards UK suppliers from the EU. We've found that and felt that over the last year or so from Europe, from the EU. Fear of red tape and custom hedging, all of these areas, standards and rules. It's not getting any easier with the trade agreement, unfortunately. So be aware that your customers may be looking for alternatives. It's estimated 60% have already looked. So keep them close, talk to them. Create a Brexit plan checklist, make sure you're ready, make sure it's as smooth as possible, discuss and plan your importer and VAT requirements, review your contracts with all of your suppliers and customers, agree Incoterms and so on, and really consider the rules of origin and the simplifications and custom simplifications which may apply to help you ease through that. Make it seamless, perfect execution we call it for your clients. So in summary, we're out of the EU. The TCA does mean zero tariffs. Rules of origin, however, do apply and can be very complicated. So look into that in detail. Plan for Brexit. You needs a very strategic plan. There is more red tape and there's a lot of confusion, but really you need to understand the customs and VAT changes. The end of free movement of labour it may be a key area. And it's the end of free access to EU markets. So these complications that we're hearing on the news, they will hopefully settle down with time, but they are there. But the challenges are surmountable. Don't be an ostrich and bury your head in the sand. They can be resolved, and with careful planning and help. Thank you very much. I'm sorry if I've gone over time a little bit.
You were right up to the wire almost, Mike, but you know what they say, time flies when you're enjoying yourself, and that hour certainly has gone, certainly has flown by. I thought I knew a little bit about the subject matter today, but I've learned a lot more listening to you, so really appreciate you covering some complex areas there and doing so in a way which has come across in very understandable means. So really appreciate that. A lot of information as well for listeners to take in. You'll appreciate. So
yes.
We haven't got any questions from the audience as such, which is not a bad thing because we need to end in just a minute's time. But I'd just like to add one thing to the information you gave at the end there, Mike, around the help available from UK government. Also for businesses in Wales who have got issues around EU transition, there is the Business Wales helpline also, which is on hand for you, which will point you in the direction of people within Welsh Government who may be able to solve your particular issue or thing that's bothering you. And the telephone number for that helpline is 03000 603,000. So fairly easy to remember that. It's 03000 603,000, or you can find, you can actually put an email, an online email via businesswales.gov.wales. So any businesses listening to this who have particular issues, concerns still, of course, there's the UK government guidance, which we base a lot of our decision making around, as Welsh government officials, of course. You can also ask particular questions and raise them with us via the means that I've just said. So we're right up to the wire now. All that remains is for me to thank you, Mike, once again for your time and insight today. Very, very
Welcome.
helpful.
Thank you.
And this ends this particular session. Thank you all.
Thank you for joining the Emerging Tech Fest. Join us again on our virtual live sessions or watch us on playback anytime, anywhere.